Coming up on this episode of Crime Family.
Shortly before 2:20 a.m. that morning, 26-year-old Warriena Wright falls to her death from a balcony 14 stories above the ground. At 12:55, a recording device is activated by Gable, and the horrific events of the night from this point on are disturbingly caught on audio tape.
No! 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 No!
You're trying to kill me, huh?
No!
Why did you try to hit me with that?
No!
Huh?
No!
I'll probably have nightmares. That was super creepy. Not even a minute goes by and he already calls his lawyer. It just seems like he already has figured out what he needs to do to help himself.
And so it was a very controversial case. Like, there was many people on both sides. There was people who felt that he should be acquitted, and then other people said he definitely should be guilty just based on the audio tape. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Crime Family. I'm your co-host AJ, and I'm here with my two sisters, Stephanie and Katie, just like always. And this week, I'm actually going to be covering a case from Australia that is both bizarre and pretty controversial, and that is the death of Warriena Wright. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, I just want to place a warning up front because I will be playing some pretty intense audio footage in this episode that might be upsetting or triggering or hard to listen to. So, but I do feel like the audio clip is critical to the entire case. So I feel like I have to play it just because it's super important to everything that happens. It basically is the case, more or less. So that's why I'll be playing it. But yeah, I just wanted to put a little bit of a warning up front. So the case happens in the early morning hours of August 8th, 2014. And shortly before 2:20 a.m. that morning, 26-year-old Warriena Wright falls to her death from a balcony 14 stories above the ground. And immediately, questions are raised about what exactly happened. Like, was it a possible suicide? Was it a murder? Was it an accident? Initially, I'm sure when it happened, that was probably the question that was running through everyone's mind. This woman just fell from the balcony, and so it's probably one of those three scenarios, and everyone didn't really quite know what had happened. But the investigation didn't last long, however. Very shortly afterwards, 28-year-old Gable Tostee was arrested and charged with her murder. So it sounds like case closed, but not exactly. The reason that this case was so controversial and captured Australia's attention was because of the circumstances in the hours leading up to and after Warriena's death. So Warriena Wright was a tourist from New Zealand who was on vacation in the Gold Coast, which is a city just south of Brisbane on the east coast of Australia. And she was there for a friend's wedding, and then she was going to be in Australia for about a week. And Gable Tostee lived in the Gold Coast, and he was a self-proclaimed playboy. Like, he loved fast cars, working out, partying, and meeting women. In fact, he would often boast about the number of women he would hook up with, and he loved to frequent the different dating apps and hook up with all these different women. So that was just kind of his lifestyle. And the night of August 7th, that woman was Warriena Wright. So about a week prior to the events that happened in this case, Warriena and Gable matched on the dating app Tinder, and they planned to meet up while Warriena was still on vacation in the city. So at some point before she left, they both wanted to meet up. They eventually did meet on the night of August 7th around 8:45 p.m. Surveillance footage shows the pair meeting outside of a surf shop in the downtown core of the city. And then after meeting, the pair goes to Surfer's Paradise Tavern Beer Garden. But they leave shortly thereafter and instead go to a local store and buy a 6-pack of beer. And then they head back to Gable's apartment building, which was called the Avalon Apartments. And they entered the building just before 9 p.m. that night. The next trackable movement that we know from the pair happens early the next morning, which is at 12:55 a.m. So this would have been about nearly 4 hours after they entered the apartment building. At 12:55, a recording device is activated by Gable, and the horrific events of the night from this point on are disturbingly caught on audio tape. So I'm going to play some of this audio in just a little bit, but first I'll describe a little bit about sort of what takes place, and then I'll let you hear some of that for yourself. In interviews with 60 Minutes Australia, Gable admits that the pair did have sex in his apartment, and then afterwards just continued to drink, and it's clear that the two are very drunk from the moment that the recording starts at 12:55 a.m. Like I said, which was nearly 4 hours after they entered the apartment building, and they were pretty much drinking the majority of the time. So when questioned on 60 Minutes Australia about why he was recording the events of that night, Gable says, quote, "Why wouldn't you do that? Obviously, I used to go out quite a lot, drinking. I don't have the best memory when I drink. And in this day and age, recording your night out is as easy as pressing a button and leaving your phone in your pocket." End quote. And then he also says, quote, "More of a just-in-case thing, because you're better off having something and not needing it than needing something and not having it. Just in case, well, you know, the thing that happened on the 8th of August, 2014 is a perfect example." End quote. So my question is, like, why did he turn this recording on at that time? Like, did he know something sinister was going to happen? Did he plan for something to happen? Was he recording it for his own sick pleasure? Like I said, I don't know. No one really knows exactly why he turned that recording on, but for whatever reason he did. And it is a good thing that he did, because it definitely gives us a better idea of what really happened inside that apartment that night. The full recording that includes the events of this night is over 3 hours long in total, and there is a YouTube video that has the entire recording on it, unedited or anything, and it is about 3 hours and 20 minutes. And when the recording starts, you know, you can hear the pair having conversations, and they're fighting a little bit or arguing, and they're drinking, and they're playing music, etc. And one random conversation they're having, they're talking about what happens after death, and Gable makes a reference to being thrown off the balcony. He says, quote, "Throw me off the balcony and that is it. This is it. Boom." End quote. Which, I mean, is a kind of a random sort of comment to make, and considering what happens a little bit later, it's just interesting. But just it kind of goes to show you, like, the nature of their conversations. Like, it's just really random. They're jumping from topic to topic, playing music and fighting and all that kind of stuff. The point in the recording where things really take a turn for the worst is when Warriena decides that she's going to leave but cannot find her phone. And she accuses Gable of taking it, and this obviously upsets her. And then Gable says, "I should have never given you so much to drink. I thought we were going to have fun." End quote. And then the conversation calmed down once again, which is kind of the pattern throughout the recording. Like, at the beginning, it kind of starts as intense arguing, followed by a calmer stretch where they're just talking, and then it goes back to arguing again. And then it just kind of escalates and escalates and escalates, eventually to the point where it's only fighting and there's no sort of calmer periods in between. A witness's police statements say that around 2 a.m., she was woken up by the pair because she lived directly below Gable's apartment, and the commotion inside his apartment was now escalating to the point where it was waking up other people in the complex just because they were being so loud and disruptive. And then shortly after 2:10 a.m., the sound of rocks being thrown around the apartment by Warriena can be heard, and Gable had these small, like, white decorative pebbles in the apartment, I guess, for some reason. He just had them there, and these must have been the items that Warriena was throwing around. So she was throwing them around the apartment, throwing them at him directly. And then at 2:14 a.m., there's a chilling exchange between the two that's even more sinister, given the events of what happens just minutes later. So Gable says, quote, "That is enough. You have worn out your welcome. You have to leave." And then Warriena says, "Okay." And then at 2:15 a.m., Gable says, "I thought you were kidding, and I have taken enough. This is fucking bullshit. You are lucky I haven't chucked you off my fucking balcony, you goddamn psycho little bitch." So I'm actually going to play that portion of the audio for you so that you can hear kind of like the tone of his voice and a little bit of like the context of the situation of what's happening. But that's kind of what you're going to be hearing in the audio clip. So just play that now.
So I thought you were kidding, And I've taken enough. This is fucking bullshit. You're lucky I haven't chucked you off my fucking balcony, you goddamn psycho little bitch. Who the fuck do you think I am? Yeah, do your Muay Thai now. What? What? Got something to say? Say it.
Yeah.
Say it. What?
You're so sexist.
Yeah, right. I'm the one who's injured. You don't have a goddamn scratch on you, you little bitch.
Seriously. I do.
Seriously, what? Seriously, what?
I see. Well.
Seriously, what?
I see. I see.
I thought you were just playing around. But I'm fucking sick of this shit.
So what did you guys think of that clip, or have any thoughts?
I don't really understand what was happening. Like, I feel like, did she like hurt him because he said he was injured? Like, I don't really know.
Yeah, well, she was throwing the rocks, the little pebbles around
Oh yes, okay.
the room at him. Allegedly, she had been slapping him or punching him or hitting him in some way. Which is, I'll go into a little bit more detail later on about like all that, but that was like at the beginning of the clip. That's when he says like, "You're lucky I haven't thrown you off the balcony." And she's clearly, I mean, I feel like you can tell pretty much from that clip that she's very drunk.
Yeah, I was just gonna
that
say
she-
like, yeah, you can. I could tell like right from the very beginning of the video how drunk she was, because she's not really speaking in like sentences. She's just kind of mumbling or
Yeah, like just a classic sound of someone who's very drunk. And then she calls him a sexist, is like the one thing that she says. I don't know if it's a little bit hard to make out. Maybe she calls him a sexist, and then he says, "Well, you're the one, or I'm the one with marks on me, and you don't have a scratch on you." So it's basically the beginning of the escalation. What's the point of that?
what were they arguing about?
Who knows? It's like literally, like, I mean, they're both very drunk. I think, I don't know. They both just got aggressive with each other, and like I said, they had never met before that night, so they have literally no history. So it's not like they were fighting about anything in particular. There would be nothing for them to really fight about. Like, you know, it's not like this couple that has like years of history or.
Okay, so going into this, before I heard the audio and you were saying that he had turned the video recording on and what could be the reason for that, well, I was thinking maybe, you know, people just get really drunk and people tell them, like, go back and say, oh, you did this, it was hilarious, or you said this, and you don't remember. And so maybe, and you're always like, well, I wish I could remember what I did. So maybe turning that on is his way of realizing what he's actually like when he's drunk. So that's what I was thinking at first. And then also, before I listened to it, I was thinking that they would sound way more drunk than they were. Like when I heard it, it sounds like he really wasn't that drunk. It sounded like he was in control of what was happening. And for her, if I didn't know that she was drunk, to me it sounds like she's in distress because she's breathing really heavily. It sounds like you can't even understand what she's saying. So it's kind of like if you don't have any context, it almost sounds like he is kind of like holding her down because she's breathing and she can hardly talk. That's what comes to my mind.
I feel like you always say like the next part of what I'm going to go into. So it's very interesting that you say that because that does play in to a little bit of what happens. Yeah, that's definitely not like just your own observation. It is a very important part of this whole thing.
Okay. Yeah, because it doesn't sound like they're having a conversation, right? It's like he's talking at her while she's kind of struggling.
Yeah, and this is like, at that point, like I just took that piece of the clip, obviously, because I said it's a 3-hour full. This is like, this part here is right before the next clip I'm going to play, which is like the most intense one. But this one, so this is like already like an hour into the recording. So this is already, if you listen to the whole thing, it's already has been like basically an hour of that already, like arguing, calling each other names. But then, like I said before, there is periodic moments where it's like, then they'll calm down, and then they'll have another drink, and then they'll just talking regularly, and then it escalates again. And like each time it escalates, it just escalates to the next highest level until it just kind of explodes. But yeah, like that comment at the very beginning of the clip where he says, "You're lucky I haven't thrown you off the balcony," and that's the second time in this recording that he's mentioned falling off a balcony. Just for, because he says that the first time he's like, "Just fall off the balcony, that's it," or "This is it, boom," when they're talking about what happens after death. So like he has talked about the balcony a few times, which is, I mean, could just be a random coincidence, but maybe just an interesting note. Oh, and also too, yeah, what you were saying about the reasoning why he may have turned on the recording, like that was the reasoning you said was also what he kind of says in this interview. He says like, "I don't really have the best memory when I'm drinking," which is like makes it allude to the fact that it could be that he just, I don't know, curious about what he sounds like when he. But to me, it just seems like there had been something that happened that made him be like, "Oh, I need to be recording this." For some specific reason, because he turns it on at 12:55 a.m., which, like I said, is nearly 4 hours after they enter the apartment. So it's like, did something happen? Did she say something that then he's like, "Well, shit, I better be recording this just in case." But we don't ever get like a clear answer about why. In an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, Gable says that he regrets his choice of words at that moment where he says, "You're lucky I haven't thrown you off the balcony." He says that was, quote, "It was the worst choice of words one could have used," end quote. Because the interviewer, of course, brings that up. And they're like, "It's very interesting that you say this, considering what happens." So that's kind of that was his response to that. So next in the recording, like you heard, Warriena accuses Gable of being sexist, and Gable responds by saying, quote, "You're a goddamn psycho. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to walk you out of this apartment just the way you are. You're not going to collect any of your belongings. You're just going to walk out, and I'm going to slam the door on you. Do you understand? If you try to pull anything, I'll knock you out. Do you understand?" End quote. So that was another part of this whole interaction as well. Then Warriena apologizes, but Gable doesn't accept it, and he's clearly very agitated at this point in the tape. So now I'm actually going to play the next audio clip, which is about 3.5 minutes, and I'm going to play this one uninterrupted. And then I'll go back and kind of explain like what investigators believe is happening, because it's not all talking. It's a lot of like sounds and noises. So then the investigators kind of try to piece it together based on what the recording is. And this is a disturbing one, so I'll just warn you again. It's like a domestic situation, but yeah, so that's audio clip number 2.
Come on, get up. Get up. Fuck up. Get up. Okay, get up. You don't understand, do you? You don't understand anything at all, do you? You don't understand. You don't understand, do you? You just don't understand. Let go. You think you can hit me and I'll just like fall down like in the movies? Huh? You don't understand, do you? Let go of it. Let go. Let go. Let go. do you think you are?
No!
Hmm?
No! No!
You're
No!
trying to kill me, huh?
No!
Why'd you try to hit me with that?
No!
Huh?
No! 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 No!
Fucking mouth. It's all on recording, you know? It's all being recorded. Come here, quick. I would, but you've been a bad girl.
All right. So, did you have any thoughts about this one before I kind of explain it a little bit about what's happening?
Well, in the beginning, like the very beginning of that clip, it just sounds like he's like has his hand around her throat. Sounds like she's like struggling to breathe. Like I don't know. It sounds like a gurgling noise. I don't know if that's just what it sounds like to me, but like obviously she's like. Did she have? I'm assuming she had something in her hand or something because he kept saying like "let go" or. Anyways,
Yeah.
It's a very disturbing clip.
Yeah, so I'll probably have nightmares. That was super creepy. Yeah, that was super creepy. And Steph, the same thing you said is exactly what I was thinking too. It kind of sounds like he's trying to choke her. And he says something like, you think you're just gonna fall over like in the movies or something? It makes me think like he's trying to choke her till she passes out. I don't know. Yes, and it almost seems like I picture when he's saying just let go, maybe she's like holding on to the balcony rails. He's trying to like push her, like strangle her and push her over, but she won't let go because then she starts screaming. So it's like he does let go of her throat so she can finally breathe and yell again. So that's what I'm picturing. And what I find interesting though is like he doesn't forget that it's recording. He tells her it's recording the whole time. So if he is doing something that he knows is illegal or gonna, come back to get him, why would he just keep recording? It's super strange.
Yeah, because you can't even, like, it's a good point. You can't say that he forgot it was recording because he literally mentions it in that audio clip that it's recording, making sure that she knows it's recording. So yeah, I guess I'll explain a little bit, and most of what Steph said was right. And I think, and Katie, the part you said where he's like, you think I'm gonna just fall down, I think he's referring to like she had something in her hand and she thought she was just gonna hit him and he would fall down like in the movies or something. I think that's what he meant by that. But so in this audio, it's believed that Warriena had picked up a metal object, and this is thought to be like it was a metal clamp for a microscope that he had in his apartment, like a little clamp that like attached it to the desk. So she had taken that and she was going to be using that as a weapon. So that's what she has in her hands. And then as a defense, it's alleged that Gable began choking her in an attempt to get her to drop it. So that's where you can hear him say, let it go, a few times. Then you can hear choking sounds from Warriena as Gable's, again, this is kind of what is being speculated by like the prosecutors later on, but you can hear choking sounds from Warriena as Gable's grasp on her tightens, and then she begins breathing really heavily, which, as you can tell, you can hear like the gargling sound of someone who's very clearly being choked, and then the heavy breathing. And then Gable says, let it go again, and that's when you hear the sound of the metal object hitting the ground, which is probably when she lets go of what she was holding. And then this is when Gable, he takes her and brings her to the balcony. So he puts her onto the balcony, and then he locks the screen door behind her and just like kind of leaves her on the balcony. And that's when she's screaming like, no, just let me go home. And then he says, no, because you've been a bad girl. And then he locks the door. Yeah, during this, you can hear her screaming the word no numerous times. And then very shortly after this, so I'm not sure if you guys caught this on your first time. It's very faint, but towards the end of the clip, you can hear a faint scream from a woman that lasts just about a second or two. And it's believed that this is the moment that you can hear Warriena falling 14 floors to her death. So I'm gonna play that 15 to 20 seconds again, just so that you can hear that last bit in case you didn't hear it the first time. And you just listen closely, you can probably hear it a little bit in the background. So, and it is creepy to hear, because it's very obvious. I feel like that is what it was, or at least to me, that is what it is. And so that same witness who was woken up by the pair earlier on says in her police statement that at approximately 2:21 a.m. she could hear a woman screaming no, and then she sees, quote, 2 legs dangling down. Quote, in a matter of seconds, I saw the person fall from the balcony above mine, end quote. She then calls 000, which is the equivalent to 911 in Australia, and she calls 911 at about 2:23 a.m. And this detailed timeline of events is from an article by the Brisbane Times, and they do a really good job of kind of outlining the timeline of events. So it's kind of speculated that, because it's only like 27 seconds from the time he locks her onto the balcony until when she falls, that like she felt so fearful that she tried to like either climb down to the apartment below or use from the balcony climb to the next apartment over, but she's obviously very drunk, so that's obviously not going to go well. And then she falls in the process of doing that. Immediately following the fall, Gable also gets on the phone, but not to 911. He calls his lawyer immediately. His lawyer doesn't answer because it is 2:30 in the morning. And in the 60-minute Australia episode, where they interview Gable in depth, the interviewer points out that there was only 35 seconds between the time Warriena fell to her death and Gable calling for his lawyer. So rather than checking, going out to the balcony, checking out what happened or anything else, he went right into action in his own defense. Like, that's the first thing he thinks of is like, oh, I better call my lawyer. And then Gable claims in this interview that he didn't go outside or look over the balcony out of fear that someone might see him looking over directly after the fall, which would then not look good for him at all. This woman falls down and then they just see him staring. So it's not really necessarily the actions of a remorseful person. Like, that's his first thought. It's like, oh, well, I better not go out there because people are going to think it was I pushed her or something. So like the interviewer kind of pushes back on this a little bit, and like it's very clear in the interview that you can see what they think of this man, because they're like challenging everything he says and questioning every reasoning he comes up with. They just question it. The police very quickly arrive on the scene at 2:25 a.m. which is about 2 minutes after the 911 call was placed, and this is around the same time that the key fob for Gable Tostee's apartment is activated. Security camera captures a man that was believed to be Gable approach the front entrance of the building, but then walk back to the elevator and ride it down to the basement. And then another security footage catches him going out another entrance, which was through the underground parking garage. So this is probably because there were multiple police officers on the scene and he didn't want to be seen like walking in that area. Although this is very early on, so it's very unlikely that him just walking out of the apartment building, like no one's going to think anything of him at that time. This is literally like minutes after. It's not going to be focused on him. So I think he would just thought, well, I better go out this back way through the underground parking garage because I don't want to even interact with the police at this time. And the recording captures all of this. Like I said, it goes for like 3.5 hours pretty much uninterrupted. So you can hear the sound of footsteps. And then at around 3:10 a.m., you can hear Gable ordering a slice of pizza. So he walked to the nearest pizza place and ordered a slice of pizza, which is really random. And he's just kind of walking around this sort of area close by his apartment. So after locking Warriena out on the balcony, drunk and frantic, and after she falls 14 floors to her death, he calls his lawyer, walks outside through a back entrance, and goes and orders a slice of pizza. Not once has he called the police or alerted anybody to anything that's transpired. So just a very sort of bizarre reaction. Then Gable calls his father Gray, and again, this is being recorded, and I'm going to play a portion of that audio as well. So that's the third and final audio clip, is when he calls his dad.
Hello, Dad? I might have a bit of a situation. See, I met up with a girl for a date tonight, and she started getting really aggressive. Like, it was alright at first, and like, we, had sex in bed, and then after that, like, she kept drinking, and we were both drinking, and she, like, I think she thought it was like a joke or something, but she kept, like, beating me up and whatever. Yeah, and it was because she was really drunk, and like, I forced her out on the balcony, and I think she might have jumped off. Like, I've been walking around and there are like a million cops around my building. I'm fucked. I don't know what to do. Hey? Like where? I didn't cause this. Like I didn't push her or anything. I'm like just walking around the area, and there's like a million cops around the area. It's really fucked up. I'm like next to Domino's. Dad, like I didn't. This isn't my fault. I didn't do this. I was giving her my alcohol, but she was really violent, and I don't know. I like tackled her on my floor inside the building, and then, but I never forced her over the balcony. God no, I'd never do anything like that. It's really fucked up. I don't know what to do. Like I'm just I'm walking around the area, and I just see a million cops around Avalon.
So do you guys have any thoughts about either the phone call with his dad, and that's just a portion of it, it goes on for a while, or do you have thoughts about his actions after the fact?
I just find it really, I don't know if the word callous is a good word to use, but I just feel like he's just not obviously taking responsibility for putting her out on the balcony because he locked the door and so she couldn't get out. So if she was trying to get away from him to climb down the balcony or whatever, like, he's kind of confining her to this one location. So I feel like he caused her to fall over the balcony even though he didn't push her because she had no other place to go. And then when he calls his dad, it's like he's playing the victim card. It's like, oh, I had nothing to do with it. Like, she was hurting me. She's being violent towards me. Like, he doesn't really take a whole lot of responsibility for hurting her. So I just find that really, just very, I don't know, callous, I guess. And I just...
Yeah, also, it seems not even a minute goes by and he already calls his lawyer. It just seems like he already has figured out what he needs to do to help himself. And he's not as frantic as you would think someone just fell off your balcony and is dead on the road right below your balcony. You'd think you'd be more frantic if you cared at all about people. And in the first audio, when he's saying, like, she just wants to go home, and he's saying, I would, but you've been a bad girl. Like, why not? If he just wants her out, why not just put her out the front door, like, out the door of his apartment into the hallway, not the balcony? You know what I mean? So it's like, why not just shove her out that other door and lock it so she's out of your apartment? And yeah, and just the fact that he goes to get some food, he sneaks out of the apartment and then calls his dad and keeps saying over and over again he had nothing to do with it. You know, it just makes me think that obviously he feels like people have reason to think that he did. So it just seems like he's thinking about it way too much rather than flipping out the way I probably would if that happened to me.
Yeah, and he keeps saying things like, I'm so fucked, versus like, you know, like, I can't, you know what I mean? Like, it's all about himself. Like, I'm gonna go down for this. This is, you know, they're gonna, you know, arrest me or whatever, right? Like, it's all about him versus like that this woman just literally died from his balcony and stuff. Yeah, you're right too. Like, the whole thing with he's like confining her to this small little space. I'll get a little bit more into that also too, but yeah, it's just weird. I feel like everything that he does from the minute, like the whole audio, but especially after she falls, and then he calls his lawyer right away, calls his dad, like goes out a back entrance, like he is trying to be very discreet, obviously. But something that's weird to me is like, I'm just trying to like put myself in his shoes. Like, why would he keep that recording after it happens? Like after she falls, and he's gonna know that there's like audio of them fighting and all of the stuff he says. It's like, why would he still keep that? Not like his first move should have gone and thrown that phone into the dumpster or something. Like, to me, that was also kind of weird. Because you have to know that that's going to be coming up at some point in this process. If you know,
to me, I think if you keep something like that, and because he thinks he is innocent, and if he actually is, like he didn't actually have anything to do with it directly, he thinks that tape will prove it, because that's actually what happened. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is what happened, and this is what you can hear it happening. And to him, because he knows what happened, he thinks it's helping him, when if you have no context and you're just listening, it really looks bad for him. But he doesn't know that, because if he is innocent, you know what I mean? He thinks because he is, it's going to help him.
Like someone who like doesn't necessarily know like the legal system, and he's like, well, I feel like I am innocent, so therefore I have nothing to hide. So why would I hide anything? Versus like, if you know a little like how this is going to be look bad, or like get pinned on you, or not, you know, if he's responsible, whatever, you know what I mean though? Like, yeah, in his mind, if he's like, I'm innocent, so there's no point in hiding, and like maybe hiding this tape is going to make it look even more fishy. So I guess that's a good point too.
Yeah, that's what makes me think that maybe he is innocent, or he feels like he is, and that's why he kept it.
Mm-hmm. And is there any part of you that think, like, I mean, you guys obviously haven't heard the whole thing. I haven't even listened to the full 3.5 hours, but I've listened to like obviously much larger portion than you guys. But I get the sense that some of the things that he says, like he's saying it because he knows it's being recorded. So he's like, not like he's like narrating what's happening, but he's making it very obvious in certain spots. And like he's mentioning that this is being recorded. And I just feel like, I don't know. To me, I mean, maybe that wasn't what he was thinking at all, but to me, there's some moments where I'm thinking like, oh, well, he definitely said that because he knows it's being recorded or something. Like that was my initial thought, but
yeah. Well, in the first recording, when you listen, it doesn't sound like somebody that's scared. Like he's not scared of her, even though she's allegedly attacking him. So if he was actually scared, you'd think he would show that, but it just sounds super like scary. What he's saying and how calm he is, and he's trying to control her. But if he actually was freaking out, why wouldn't that be part of the tape? You know what I mean? It sounds like he's definitely in control and is the one that's being the aggressor.
Yeah, and there's no point in the tape that I heard that he was ever sounded fearful during his interactions with her. The only time he ever sounds a little bit stressed is after the fact, when he's breathing heavily and trying to figure out what the fuck to do. That's when he sounds the most stressed in the whole thing. Like, he doesn't sound, like you said, he doesn't sound scared of her at all in any of their interactions. There is a point that's brought up by the interviewer in 60 Minutes Australia. That is also the point that you made, Katie, because the interviewer says, why put her on the balcony? Like, he could have just put her outside the door into the hallway of the apartment building. He says that he was trying to de-escalate the situation and calm her down, and that was like the first thing he thought that he could do. But like, the apartment door was just as close as the balcony door. So to me, that doesn't really make any sense at all. It's very bizarre how going to put somebody on your balcony is your first choice versus putting them out the front door.
And I'm going to assume the balcony is super skinny and not very big, because if it's on the 14th floor, like, I've been on like some balconies that are super high up and like very skinny. So like, she wouldn't have a whole lot of room to move around if she was trying to like...
Well, it is a decent size. Like, they do show photos of the apartment and the balcony, and it's like, well, it's not like huge, but, you know, there's enough to have, like, you know, patio furniture out there to, like, sit and stuff. So, it's big enough, but, not like those little, like these little skinny ones where you can just kind of walk out and, like, look over there, but there's no, like, room to actually do anything. It's, like, a larger It's a little bit larger than that. But yeah, so it's just interesting that Katie mentioned, like, why not the door? Because that's exactly what the interviewer brings up, which is obviously a good point. And I think that any rational person would think, like, let's just put her out the door into the hallway versus the balcony, which just seemed like a very strange choice.
Because she's on the balcony out of his apartment, but she's going to have to come back in to get out anyway. So why not just, like, the first step just be get her out of the apartment and she never has to come back in. But yeah.
Like, it sounds very much like he's just trying to do it to scare her, intimidate her,
like trap her there because she can't leave.
Yeah, just being like a vindictive asshole, basically. Like, he knows, oh, this is going to be like terrifying, you know, scary. You're going to lock you out on the balcony, versus just being a rational person.
Yeah, exactly.
So the conversation with his father goes on for a while in the audio tape, and then after the phone call, the recording stops, and it's about 4:15 a.m. when the recording finally stops. According to the same timeline by the Brisbane Times, Gable and his lawyer go to the local police station at 11:30 a.m. that morning, so that would only be, you know, like 6-7 hours later. While at the police station, Gable refuses to participate in a police interview, but he is examined after a forensic investigation is ordered. A doctor who examines him does notice a series of small cuts on Gable's body, but he is released without charges at that time. And they do show in the 60 Minutes Australia a few pictures of, I'm assuming, must have been from that time that he was examined, but he did have, you know, cuts on his knees and his arms. To me, they weren't like scratches necessarily. They were more, to me, they look kind of like scabbed. To me, they look kind of scabbed over. Like, maybe it wasn't the same day then, because it wouldn't have been scabbed over that quickly. To me, that's what it kind of looked like. But they did notice that he had some noticeable cuts on his body. On August 9th, so this would only be the next day, the police search a car that's parked outside Gable's father's home, and they find a Sony Xperia cell phone where the full 3.5-hour recording is discovered by the police for the first time. So, of course, they seize that phone. Investigators were able to determine that the audio file was transferred onto that phone from another device, although they were unable to determine what device it was initially recorded on. So for some reason, it was like transferred, whether it was like a little audio tape or a little tape recorder, or if it was a cell phone, probably a cell phone. But for whatever reason, it was transferred off its initial source onto this other phone that was then in this car that the police searched.
Yeah, he probably, if it was on his phone, his own cell phone, he probably tried to get rid of it because he didn't want that. He knew the police were going to look at his stuff, but he wanted to keep it for some reason and put it somewhere else where he didn't think they'd find it.
Yeah, and so whoever's phone that was, it was in a car that was parked at his dad's house. It could have been his second phone he had, or who knows whose phone that was. Where he also could have been advised by a lawyer too. Like, you don't know if his lawyer is saying, like, get that off your phone, but also keep it just in case we need it later or something. Like, you never know what the lawyer is also telling him. There is also an autopsy that is conducted for Warriena, but because of the extent of her injuries, they were unable to determine if she had any substantial injuries prior to her fall. So they couldn't tell if there was anything, if she had any injuries before she fell off, because there was just too much injury, obviously, from her fall. It was pretty much impossible to determine that. And then less than a week later, on August 15th, or I guess it would have been exactly a week after the 8th, Gable Tostee is arrested and charged with murder and manslaughter. The argument of the prosecution is not that Gable threw her off the balcony, but that Warriena's death was caused by the intense fear she must have felt that she fell to her death trying to escape. And that was the bulk of their argument. So I find it interesting that he was charged with murder and manslaughter, which was kind of an interesting point. I feel like it's either one or the other. So
yeah, I didn't know you could do that. Like, in case he doesn't get murder, we'll get him for manslaughter instead. Yeah, I didn't think you could double up like that on the same thing.
Yeah, me neither. Maybe in Australia you can, but I feel like it's either manslaughter or murder. Like, if it's murder, it's not manslaughter. If it's manslaughter, it's not murder. It's just weird.
Yeah, that is super weird.
So that was like an interesting kind of thing I noted. And so then this begins the highly publicized trial of Gable Tostee. So I think in Australia and in New Zealand, because Warriena was from New Zealand, I think it was a huge, like, high-profile case there. But it wasn't really super well known, like, outside of Australia, I don't think. And so for, like, a lot of people were following the trial and the case because, of course, he was pleading not guilty to the charges. And so there was a public trial. He denies that he ever physically assaulted Warriena. He denies choking her like the prosecution claims. And he says that the sounds on the audio tape were not of choking. So in his interview with 60 Minutes, which is interesting, Gable says that in court, the pathologist disproved the choking theory by determining that there were no signs of physical injury prior to her fall. But that seems to contradict the initial statement that because of the severity of her injuries, they could not determine whether there were injuries sustained before her fall. So maybe that did come out later on during the trial, but initially when they did the autopsy, they couldn't determine that. But then that must have changed later when they got the pathologist to come into the courtroom and testify that there wasn't any marks on her body before. An article by The Guardian says that the defense argued that Gable used reasonable force to subdue her and that his actions were justified because of the erratic and violent behavior of Warriena that night. And so it was a very controversial case. Like, there was many people on both sides. There was people who felt that he should be acquitted because, you know, he didn't push her off the balcony, he didn't throw her over the balcony or anything like that. And then other people said he definitely should be guilty just based on the audio tape, and like, clearly she was in that position because of him, which I think maybe could lean, you could see more of a case for maybe a manslaughter charge, like manslaughter causing death or something, or I guess that is manslaughter, versus the murder charge. But there was definitely people on both sides, and there is an article by CNN that kind of showcases like some tweets that people were tweeting at the time, and to have a little bit of both sides. So what do you think of the defense's argument that he was reasonable in the force he used?
No, I feel like he knew what he was doing to her, and to me in that clip that we heard, the second one, it clearly sounds to me that she's having a hard time breathing, like choking. I'm sorry, but I know they said it wasn't conclusive, but I feel like that's what it sounds like to me. I think
that's just a natural like reaction. Like, that's just what it sounds like. I think it's pretty obvious, but there's no video, so we don't know for sure because he's denying it and the defense is denying it. So there's no way to really know other than if you just listen to it, which I think sounds pretty obvious. But
and the fact that he was avoiding like going out the front door and being seen by people and like trying to avoid the whole situation shows me that he knew what he did, and he knew that he was going to get in trouble, and that he put her on that balcony, confined her to that space. So I feel like he should have got, obviously manslaughter. I feel like he should have got what he was charged with. Because
do you think it should be murder or manslaughter? Like, do you have a? And obviously, there's different rules in Australia. Like, there must be different like guidelines of what each charge sort of entails. But to me, I could see more of a case for. I feel like if I was a prosecutor, or if I was maybe a prosecutor, yeah. If I was a prosecutor, I'd probably push for the manslaughter, because that seems more like a likely conclusion that the jury could come to of a manslaughter, given the fact that he didn't actually like push her over, that we know of, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I
want to say murder, just because he put her on that balcony knowing that, like, maybe not knowingly that she was gonna like fall over, but she had nowhere else to go, and he could have just easily have put her out the front door and just let her go, but he chose to put her out there.
I mean, I think like you can, and I don't know if the defense made this argument, but like you could also make the argument, just playing devil's advocate, that like, you know, she could have just sat there and did nothing, and he eventually would have opened it and let her back in. Like, she didn't have to climb. You know what I mean? Like, so you can make that argument as well, which if you're playing devil's advocate. But obviously, if you're drunk and you're not in your right mind, you're not going to be thinking that.
Well, yeah, and so to me, I mean, it does seem like manslaughter at least, because, yeah, he put her out there and made her scared enough that she didn't want to just wait there for him to open the door. She felt like she had to get out of there. And of course, she was super drunk, so she wasn't thinking clearly, but the fact that she was that scared was probably his fault. Like, he didn't, even if she was being aggressive, he still scared her enough for her to think that that was her only option, was to get down that balcony. Also, I feel like you were saying at the beginning, he, described himself as a playboy and that was his lifestyle. He just seems like very arrogant. And you can hear in that video where he's saying that he's not going to let her go because she's been a bad girl. It was like if she fought back, that is kind of him being arrogant enough to be, well, now you deserve, something bad to happen to you because you're going to stand up to me. It just seems like that's kind of what is happening here. And then he put her out there to be, this is your punishment for even trying to come at me. And that's what happened. So it feels like he did all these things wrong, and that's what caused her to die. So manslaughter, I feel like for sure, at least.
So after the trial was after the closing arguments and everything, and before the jury left to go deliberate, the judge reminded them that they cannot find him guilty just because they find his actions after the event, like calling his lawyer or leaving through the basement and ordering pizza. If they find those events troubling, like they can't just find him guilty because of that. Like they have to be satisfied without a reasonable doubt that he intended to cause bodily harm to Warriena, kind of separate from however he reacted after the fact. So he just kind of left them with that message. So they had to be satisfied without a reasonable doubt that he intended to cause bodily harm to Warriena, and the prosecution argued that he did that when he choked her for up to 45 seconds on the audio recording. Like, that's clear that you are violent or have a violent tendency and are trying to do harm. And then the defense obviously denies that as well, because they say that she was never choked. Or if she was, it was in self-defense or, whatever, like... basically not owning up to anything that he did. So throughout all of this, Gable's parents supported him and stood by his side every step of the way. And they actually are interviewed as well by 60 Minutes Australia. And Gable's mother, Helene, says, quote, "I think that Gable behaved in a way that was appropriate," end quote, which is like weird, messed up thing for her to say.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I didn't only listen to those few minutes of tape, but from what I can hear, even just the fact that she's saying, "Just let me go home," and he's not letting her leave. I mean, that's enough there to, like, that's unlawful confinement or something. You know what I mean? And so I think that's enough to charge him with something. He won't let her leave because he's pissed that she, he's the man and she stood up to him. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. And that's also brought up in the 60 Minutes. The interviewer mentions, like, why didn't you just leave, or why didn't you just let her leave? And then he says, because there is one point in the audio where he does say, I'm gonna walk you out the door, you're gonna leave right now, blah blah blah. That was at one point, and then his thing was like, well, I offered for her to leave and she just didn't want to do that. Like, that was why. So he's like, that was his defense. Like, well, I did mention that, like an hour before. Like, as much as he took her and picked her up and put her on the balcony, he could have done that and put her outside the door.
That's what I was just gonna say. He could have just picked her up and put her outside the door. It's his apartment. If he didn't want her to be there, just fucking pick her up and put her outside the door and lock the door.
Or call the police.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That they will come and take her. Then he doesn't even have to be involved with even putting his hands on her to get her out of there. You know what I mean? Like, he could have even got out himself, called the police, and they would have dealt with it.
Yeah, like he could have left, or he could have locked himself on the balcony and said, like, there's this woman in my apartment who's aggressive and won't leave. Like, come. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
And to me, it seems really weird that they've only met for like 4 hours and how like escalated it got when they got back to the apartment. Like, he doesn't even seem that drunk to me in both of the all three of the audio clips that I heard. He doesn't, like, she sounds way more drunk than he did.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like, he was drinking, I'm sure, but I don't know if he was, like, technically, like, really drunk or whatever. Like he said, he drank a lot, so who knows, he probably had a high tolerance, and probably, I don't know if she drank a lot, but anyway, whatever, she was way drunker than he was.
And he even said, like, I gave her some of my alcohol from his house.
Yeah, because they, like, drank, they kept
to
drinking.
his dad.
Because they only bought they bought the 6-pack of beer at that store before, and then they went up, but she sounded way drunker than she just had a couple of beers, you know what I mean? Like, he definitely was giving her alcohol while she was there. But, like, basically the point is there were so many, like, 5 other options at least I could think of off the top of my head that he could have done versus what he did. I mean, I guess it's your parents, so they're going to defend you, I guess. But, like, both his mother and father support him, and his mother says that she believes that he acted in an appropriate way. Deliberation by the jury actually took 4 days. And on October 20th, 2016, the jury ultimately acquitted Gable of both murder and manslaughter charges. And he walked away a free man. So they didn't even convict him of anything. So pretty much right after that, he was able to walk away. And yeah, so that was crazy. I think at the very least manslaughter, like Katie said. I could see maybe an argument as to why maybe not murder, but like if they were gonna, I think manslaughter would have been appropriate. So it's just bizarre that he was just acquitted of everything.
Yeah, it is crazy that he didn't get anything. Like you said, murder, because it really cannot prove that he pushed her, but yeah, he definitely caused what happened to happen in some way. Yeah.
And since the trial, so that was back in 2016, he was acquitted, so it's been 6 years. Since then, Gable has assumed a new identity, changing his name to Eric Thomas. And actually, when I was researching for this case, there was actually a news article from March of this year that had a little bit of an update on Gable. So this news article reports that Eric Thomas, so aka Gable Tostee, was found naked and trapped in his car after a crash. And the crash actually happened in October of last year, but I guess the article just came out in March. The report says that his car was drifting, it hit a concrete barrier, then crossed the entire roadway before going into the bushes. He refused to submit a breath or blood sample. His eyes were bloodshot and his speech was slurred, allegedly. Police reportedly found empty bottles of mouthwash in his car. And previous to this incident and previous to the Warriena Wright case, Gable had been charged with a DUI in 2004 and in 2012 and then again in 2015. He was also. So this is a man who has a history of DUIs and erratic behavior. And yeah, so that was just a little update I saw from...
Did you say he was found naked in his car?
Yes. That's what the article said. This is very bizarre.
Yeah, so he definitely has a drinking problem, and maybe what did happen in his apartment that night messed him up more than it seems like right off the bat, because he does seem very calm and all about him, but obviously it feels like something definitely triggered even more of a drinking problem. Maybe.
Yeah, and like the point that they mentioned that there was mouthwash, empty bottles of mouthwash found in the car, like that screams to me like, yeah, somebody with a drinking problem, to have empty bottles of mouthwash, which is like almost sad in a way that he like resorted to that, because he couldn't he just like buy alcohol at like a store? Like, it's just weird. I feel like mouthwash is like a last resort for people.
Yeah, definitely. Like if the liquor store is closed, not open 24/7, but he found like a store that is open 24/7 and just went in to get some mouthwash because he couldn't get actual liquor at the time. That is sad. It's definitely addiction issues.
Yeah. So I mean, and obviously, yeah, like it could be because he was affected obviously by this case, which I don't know how you couldn't be. So that is the Warriena Wright case, and it's just kind of like sad that he was acquitted of everything, and here this 26-year-old woman who's like so young and she just died so unexpectedly and definitely preventable, and he just kind of walked away clean and clear from it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And maybe he really was drunker than he sounds, and he wasn't thinking straight and couldn't even remember what happened, and what that tape was kind of his evidence of what he did that night. We don't know. He may be completely... Obviously, he did stuff, but maybe he just wasn't in his right mind because he was that drunk. That could be a possibility, too.
Mm-hmm. And also, like I said early on, that it ended up being a... Like, I don't know, was it a good thing that he recorded or not? Because I feel like it was a good thing he recorded it, because otherwise there would be no evidence of any altercation. Like, he could have just said, oh, well, she was drunk and got up on the balcony and jumped off or whatever, right? Like, there would be no way to kind of say that didn't happen or whatever. Like, it would be much more of unclear if he didn't record it. But also the fact that he did record it was able to make the defense pinpoint certain things, because she had hit him with something, then it gave them something to sort of grab onto as well.
Yeah, I feel like it did help him, because there is evidence that maybe they were physically fighting each other and she had maybe picked up a weapon, and so it was sort of self-defense in a way, because the fact that he got off with nothing makes me think that it did help him.
Yeah, because I was thinking of that throughout, like what the outcome would have been if there had been no recording, because obviously the recording is the bulk of the case. Like, that outlines the entire timeline of events pretty much from like the time the altercation starts or whatever, so it's obviously the key point. But if they didn't have that, you know, what would they have? Just witnesses from that person downstairs who says they heard them fighting. But
yeah, they would have less evidence, but it would almost feel like, because they didn't have any evidence, it might have gone the other way, because it seems like he could have just pushed her. But with that recording, it kind of sounds like maybe he didn't. So it's hard to say. I feel like it did help him though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I can't think. I'm like, do I wish it hadn't been recorded or have? Like, I don't know, because I feel like I don't know what. I feel like it could have been the same outcome, honestly. Like, if there was no recording, then he could have just been acquitted as well, because lack of evidence, because they don't know. So
yeah, and also, but what a coincidence though that he said, "You're lucky I don't just push you off or throw you off my balcony," and then she happens to fall off her balcony that night, and he happens to be recording the whole thing. It just seems a little bit fishy. Yeah,
that's true. And that's why that's kind of highlighted in the 60 Minutes thing of like that they actually like sit down and the interviewer plays that portion of the audio for Gable, and he's just like, why'd you say that? So it's obviously, like I said before, there it's very obvious what the reporter thinks of this person. But they're just saying, he's like, what are the chances that you would say that? And then, literally 20 minutes later, she falls off the balcony. And he had mentioned the balcony before that too. Like when he said fall off the balcony, that's it.
Yeah, it's obviously something he's thinking about. But also, like most people, if you're in a fight with somebody, that's not something a normal person would say. Like, oh, you're lucky I don't just throw you off the balcony, which is basically saying you're lucky I don't just kill you. That's not something that I would say to somebody when I'm fighting with them. So he definitely does have like a vicious side to say something like that.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know if this was an official point by the defense, but I mean, I feel like an easy argument that he could have made, or the defense could have made, would have been like, well, if he wanted to kill her, then he could have just choked her. Like, he could have just not let go. And if he wanted to kill her. So he didn't actually, like, intend to kill her. Which is, like, obviously, when you look at it just like that, well, maybe. But, like, when you look at, like, the whole wider picture of what actually happened and, like, the situation he put her in, like, it's very clear that he was responsible for that. But, I don't know. I keep going back to, though, like, what prompted him to start recording in the first place. Like, I want to know if there was something specific she said that made him think, like, oh, I should be recording this. Like, probably they were fighting before that, and then maybe that's when he got the idea. Because it seems really random just to randomly start recording.
Yeah, but maybe he's recorded things before, though, and just because, like I said, he wants to listen to his night, or, he just wants to see what's actually happening. And then it just happens that this happened on one of those nights that he was recording. Like, we don't know this was the first time he ever did that.
Yeah, obviously there was outrage because people thought that he should have been convicted for at least the manslaughter charge. So the fact that he was acquitted and just kind of walked scot-free is pretty tragic, I think.
I just find it, going back to the charges, I find it weird that he was charged with murder and manslaughter, but then just got nothing. Like, why do both of those charges and then be like, oh, okay, well, there's not enough evidence or whatever, and we're just gonna let you go? Like, obviously there was some evidence there to charge him with both at the beginning.
But it's just so confusing to me because I always thought it manslaughter or murder. Like, I didn't know. Like, it's either one or the other, I feel. Like, it's just so weird that you can kind of double up on the charge like that.
Yeah, it's not like you can't just pick every charge out there and hope one of them sticks. Like, you pick one because that's what happened.
Yeah, like first degree. Oh, we're going to charge you with first degree and second degree murder and third degree murder also.
And third degree, and just see if we can get any of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you don't even know what happened. You're just grasping at whatever.
Yeah,
so
and
it weakens your point.
I don't know. It wasn't 100% clear. Like, it said that he was charged with murder and manslaughter when he was initially, but like by the time that the trial happened, which was like 2 years later, it could have been reduced to just one of those things. But it says that he was acquitted of murder, so the other one could have been thrown out at some point.
Well, was he charged with both of them at the same time, or was he maybe charged with one first and then they dropped that, and then he was charged with the other one later? Does it, like, were they doubled up at the same time?
Well, it says that he was on August 15th. He was arrested and charged with manslaughter and murder.
I'm just surprised he didn't get anything. Like, I mean, put murder and manslaughter aside. Like, I'm surprised he didn't get, like, I don't know, for like hitting her or whatever,
or wrongful confinement or whatever.
Yeah,
like confinement
wrongful,
or whatever. I don't know if that's a
charge.
Wrongful
confinement. It's a charge.
Or just confinement, I guess, or like assault if he's choking her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Crazy.
So I don't. Yeah, so an interesting and sad case. Yeah, that's the case that we have for you this week. So hope you enjoyed our discussion, and if you want to follow us, you can find us on all the social medias at Crime Family Podcast on Instagram, and at Crime Family Pod 1 on Twitter, and Crime Family Podcast on Facebook. And our email is crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. So you definitely send us an email if you have a case suggestion or tips, feedback, or anything like that. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on our website. Our website is crimefamilypodcast.ca. So you can definitely leave us a review there. You can check out transcripts and you can listen to full episodes on there as well. So definitely do all of those things. We hope you're enjoying the season, and we will be back next week with another case. So until then, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.